You're watching the Cowboys Report. I am Tom Downey. We are looking at some top trade targets for the Dallas Cowboys. Some bigger names, some smaller names, and we will attempt at some level to speak it into existence of the Jones boys actually doing something in terms of upgrading their roster. We begin with the player who they did show interest in this at the trade deadline. That is wide receiver Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans. Now, we'll break down the money as relevant for all of these players, and that's the number one potential issue with adding Cooks via trade. The Cowboys Texans had agreed to the trade principle-ish, but they wanted Houston to eat some of the money, which, by the way, if you agree on the general terms of the trade, but not the money, means you haven't actually agreed to the terms, because that's a pretty big part there. He's due $18 million this year. You'd probably have to extend him to make that salary cap hit a bit more palatable long term. I don't know if the Jones are prepared to admit the Amari Cooper mistake quite that quickly. When healthy, Cooks has been a really good football player. He didn't have a great year last year, so I'm going to ignore the stat because, it wasn't that great from a production standpoint. Cooks has high-end impactability, brings some speed this team does not have, and some disrespect to Davis Mills. Cooks would have a much better quarterback in Dak than Davis Mills. The other big-name receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, the Arizona Cardinals, who appears to be on the trade block, and maybe the trade value for both guys ends up being something in the range of second-ish round pick and a day 3 selection as well. Hopkins owed more money, also probably wants a big fat new contract. The problem you run into here, despite Hopkins being, awesome at playing football, is this injury/suspension the past 2 years. You would have to pay at some point CeeDee Lamb and insert high-end receiver here upwards of $50 million per year. I'm not sure that's what the Jones boys would like to do from that standpoint in terms of the overall investment. But Hopkins and Cooks are two of the potentially gettable, available wide receiver options who would drastically boost your receiving core from not good to, it's actually much, much better now. So of these two receivers, pick one to trade for. BC for Brandin Cooks or DH for DeAndre Hopkins. Get those votes in for me in the comments, at the pinned comments of today's video. So if an ad break happens to come for you here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down there, BC for Brandin Cooks, DH for DeAndre Hopkins. Isaiah Simmons is next up here, and this is my... in the past, we've had various pipe dreams of, Quinnen Williams was my guy for a long time. Isaiah Simmons is now that guy because I think he'd be such a fun, fantastic fit in Dan Quinn's defense. He was mainly kind of an in-the-box player in 2021, and then kind of as weird as this is, a nickel corner this past year, which I find really interesting. He's a chess piece. He would thrive alongside Dan Quinn. I think Quinn would maximize him the way maybe Arizona hasn't quite done. A great athlete. Isn't the best coverage player, but, he's a 235-pound nickel corner. That's kind of what you're going to get in the end. I would put him in a super mold of the Jaron Kearse spot. Ooh, both those guys, that's a lot of fun. So Simmons is kind of my dream target. Who is yours? I think the next name on our list, I'll see plenty of in the comment section, but I want to hear your dream trade target in the comment section. That's Jalen Ramsey. I don't think he gets moved. I don't think the money makes enough sense for LA. They still want to win football games right now with Stafford, Donald, Ramsey, McVay, the rest of that core. They say $5.6 million for the trade. It's not really the trade, by the way, these numbers, trade right now because you want assets now, right? Cowboys owe $17 million. I can make that work. Ramsey and Diggs, I think, would be an awesome 1-2 punch. Ramsey's not going to get thrown at that much, or if he does, he'll make plays in the football. Teams basically stopped throwing at Diggs this year. He was one of the least targeted corners down the stretch in the entire NFL because cornerback 2 was a huge problem for Dallas. Anthony Brown got hurt. Jordan Lewis got hurt. Deron Bland was one option, but Kelvin Joseph was bad. Nashawn Wright was bad. Xavier Rhodes barely played. They tried giving Trayvon Mullen a shot, and then they cut him. And then eventually Izzy Mukwamu played well in a hybrid role, but is that you're going to bank on a pair of 5th/6th round picks? That's a bit dangerous to gamble on long term if you are the Dallas Cowboys. Now, today's show is made possible by our friends over at Athletic Greens. I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every day. Get comprehensive and convenient daily nutrition at athleticgreens.com/chatsports. I gave AG1 a try because I wanted better gut health and a supplement that actually tastes great. I take AG1 in the morning, and it makes me feel prepared to take on my day. Once I've got baby Olivia set up with her breakfast, I make my own AG1. I don't feel the need for caffeine in the morning anymore, and I feel energized throughout the day. Plus, AG1 empowers the gut for whole body health. Covering my nutritional bases for the day couldn't be any easier, which is why I trust Athletic Greens. I mix 1 small scoop of AG1 with water, take it first thing in the morning. Done just like that. I like that it costs less than $3 a day. It's pretty good if you ask me. Way cheaper than the not good or delicious, because coffee sucks, option. It's a really effective daily habit with the highest quality sourced ingredients. It's a win-win. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then they're giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go to athleticgreens.com/chatsports. That's athleticgreens.com/chatsports. Check it out. You will not regret. The link for that, athleticgreens.com/chatsports, is in the comments section and the description of today's show. Check it out. Appreciate Athletic Greens sponsoring this edition of the Cowboys Report. More receivers, because those guys are fun and maybe potentially available. T. Higgins. We've talked about him before on the show. I'm not going to get my hopes up too high here. Higgins is good at football. Outside receiver threat, decent speed. The size gives him some good vertical ability. He's like what Michael Gallup was briefly when he was good in 2019, I think the year was, whatever it was. But Gallup's fallen off. Higgins is not. But it's a similar issue as DeAndre Hopkins. You need a receiver. Make no mistake. And Higgins, like the upgrade button, smashed a few times compared to the current version of Michael Gallup. But Higgins wants a new deal. You going to pay him $25-ish million and then pay Lamb even more? Or maybe you get Higgins for $20 million and Lamb's at $30-ish? It's a lot of money to pay to the wide receiver room, which they didn't want to do with Amari Cooper, which unfortunately does raise the red flags about some of those bigger, higher-end, sexier wide receiver options. In the end, these names on the list, they're fun. But would the Joneses do it? So be honest with me. Do you trust the Jones boys, Jerry and Catboy? Y for yes, N for no. I think I know the answer from most of you. But let me know in the comment section right now. Here's a cheaper wide receiver option who brings you speed and, frankly, just might not be that good. Might be Andy Isabella 2.0, D/Dwayne Eskridge. No production. Several of the names on the back end of this list are previously highly drafted players who haven't impacted the team the way you would like them to. But Eskridge brings you speed. You don't have speed at receiver. You don't. I mean, you got a bunch of 4-5 guys. And gadget boy Kevon, who I like as a gadget player, but doesn't play on offense and mainly on returns. So maybe get your first 7th round pick. At least explore the recent disappointing receiver trade market, because worst case, you just cut him. Now, if the Cowboys make a trade, you know we will have a video for you. Daily Cowboys videos here on the Cowboys Report by Chat Sports. So if you haven't already, join the #1 Cowboys YouTube channel out there. To guard, how about Shaq Mason, dealt for a surprisingly low draft pick this time last year, around this time last year, I should say, from New England to Tampa. Shaq Mason would plug in at guard for you right away. I would feel much better, even though he's a short-term guy, and with his age and everything, he would help you out significantly on the offensive line. And of the potential Bucs trade targets, outside of maybe Carlton Davis, which intrigues me a little bit there, he makes sense savings-wise. $8.5 million salary. They save $5.27 million. Godwin doesn't save them much. Evans, Vita Vea, who I adore, would not save them much money. Shaq Mason does save them a decent amount of money, which they have to balance a little bit here as they do a bit of a little mini reset without Tom Brady long term. Mason's undersized, but he's still a good guard. Short-term option, but he would allow you to not have to take another guard early in this year's draft. Here's a fun name, who I think might be more available than people realize. That is Ed Oliver, the Bills defensive tackle. He is on his fifth-year option. Now, he would cost the Cowboys $10.75 million, the fifth-year option. It's fully guaranteed. The problem with Oliver, who, like many of you, I loved him coming out of Houston, the production has not been very good. In fact, he took a step back this past year from 10 TFLs, 4 sacks, and 40 pressures to 9, 2.5, and 31. You don't want to pay almost $11 million for 4 sacks. So Ed Oliver, I think, is available, and maybe you think your defense can maximize him. I think that the money's a real problem there, since you're going to extend him. Is he going to take that? Probably not. He would be costing himself money short term by doing that because he's not going to get a big deal. Under the radar name, but the contract is a bit of a problem, I think, which is weird to say because I love that Oliver going to Houston. Been a disappointment so far. So will the Cowboys make a trade? Any trade at all? 1 for yes, 0 for no. You can turn back the clock pre that other injury, or I guess the point 3 injuries from now, about Caleb Farley. I loved him coming out of Virginia Tech. I thought he was the best corner in that class. Then the back surgery dropped him behind Patrick Surtain and behind J.C. Horn into the Greg Newsome range. That's a teaser, by the way. Keep watching. Unfortunately for Farley, can't stay healthy and has been bad in Tennessee. He needs a change of scenery. Who says no? Caleb Farley, boss man fat, straight up. Probably Tennessee, but I'm at least going to call about it. Greg Newsome, meanwhile, who was one of the preferred, trade down further in round 1 targets from that class, has been awesome in Cleveland. 2022 allowed 2 scores, 58% completion rate, 406 yards. He's way better than what you have right now at cornerback 2, if we include Bland as the slot guy. He raised some buzz when he was asked, do you want to play in the slot? Or he was answering an either-or question. He just said no to. People were like, he wants out. I don't think that's the case because he's a good corner, but I'd be calling about Greg Newsome and see if there is any truth to the theory that he wants out of Cleveland. He'd be a great get for Dallas. A lot of those guys would be, but we'll see if the Cowboys actually do anything in the trade market. So 10 names. A couple receivers, Brandin Cooks, DeAndre Hopkins, T. Higgins, cheap option, Dwayne Eskridge, offensive guard, Shaq Mason, some somewhat disappointing early round picks, Ed Oliver, good first round picks to an extent, Isaiah Simmons, new regime there, of course, by the way, Greg Newsome, Caleb Farley has been a pretty big bust, and of course the big sexy name of Jalen Ramsey. We'll see if one of those guys even ends up getting dealt. If they do, will the Cowboys actually be in on the deal as they claim they are every day, and we know that they are not.